This was just a taste of what Ben Kramer was going to show us all season long, as he took advantage of the slightly choppy seas to bring Warpath, his 41-foot Apache, to the head of the pack and begin to run away from the field.
On November 25, 1987, powerboat racing world champion Ben Kramer was indicted in a culmination of efforts to dismantle a significant drug trafficking and money laundering operation. The U.S. government, under the RICO Act, seized assets connected to this case in what was then the largest asset forfeiture in history. Ben Kramer's journey from powerboat racing champion to a convicted drug kingpin is a tale of ambition, greed, and the blurred lines between legal thrill-seeking and illegal enterprise. There is a misconception that people arrive at when speaking about the operation that Ben Kramer headed up, likely derived from the images of smuggling operations that have filtered to the general public over the years. The kind of shots that show a lone wolf drug runner proudly posing with bales beside their speedboat. Shots that make smuggling look like a straight shot, one-person job that anyone could do if they were daring enough. This was not how Ben Kramer and his associates smuggled an estimated 300 tons of marijuana into the United States. Just as Steve Jobs wasn't on the factory floor building iPhones in the 2000s, Kramer wasn't in a cigarette running down to South America to pick up bales in the 1980s. That may have been how it started for him, like how Apple started as two guys hand-making computer kits. But that was surely not how it ended. That was not how he became as prominent or as much of a target as he did.
Here's your leader in the open class, Ben Kramer. He manufactures boats. He talks about the benefits of racing on the circuit.
Every boat is another prototype. The boats that we run on the race circuit, we're testing drive heights, we're testing the Kevlar layups, we're testing the inner structure of the boat. If we can run a boat out here in 3 to 5 foot seas at 90 miles an hour, and the boat's strong enough, then the boat is definitely strong enough for the average consumer to go out and run 65 miles an hour. So we feel that we do all our testing on the offshore circuit and then take it back to the shop, reevaluate the boats, and put what's good into the production boats.
So Ben Kramer with an observation that makes it a little bit more interesting to boat owners all across the country, knowing that they actually are testing some of the innovations right here on the race circuit. Team Apache, the lead boat in the open class right now.
In a smuggler's world, the word offshore could only precede one of two words: powerboating or banking. While the former of these options was conducted for the world to gawk at, the latter was kept under wraps. For Kramer and his associates, the Concorde was the gateway to this mythical offshore, providing them with the first-class experience befitting of high-level executives and ferrying them to London or Paris before they jetted onwards to Liechtenstein or Switzerland. If they weren't traveling internationally, they were jetting up to New York to hold meetings at the Pierre or hopping over to Los Angeles to spend time at the Beverly Hills Hotel or L'Ermitage. This operation was nothing short of a feat of logistics, requiring unfathomable planning, coordination, and know-how on a grand scale. Ben's hallmark was running his business using barges or freighters, containerizing his product for easy offloading, warehousing, and distribution at any number of ports. It was bold, but it worked, with his barges notably arriving at the old Brooklyn Navy Yard, San Francisco, and New Orleans. For an idea of scale, the New Orleans operation reportedly netted $41 million, with Kramer claiming $13 million of the take. All of this is to say that what Ben had going was an elaborate enterprise. He was not a corner dealer. He built connections and he had employees. In order to redirect attention and justify his income, he needed something cleaner. Enter the Bell Gardens Bicycle Club. In the world of high-stakes gambling and money laundering, few stories are as audacious as that of the Bicycle Club. What began as a front for laundering drug money evolved into one of the most profitable casinos in California, pulling in nearly $500 million annually at its peak.
The city of Bell Gardens, some 10 miles from downtown Los Angeles, is home to the Bicycle Club, one of the largest of California's 250 casinos. Bell Gardens, population 48,000, is also Exhibit A for both supporters and opponents of legalized gambling. City manager Charles Gomez says thanks to the Bicycle Club, Bell Gardens is financially healthy and able to provide public services. Bud says that money laundering, kidnapping, robbery, loan sharking, and extortion have often originated inside legal casinos, including the Bell Gardens Bicycle Club.
Well, it's believed that that a lot of the money that we're seeing crossing the tables and being lent are proceeds from drugs.
Law enforcement officials worry local governments may be profiting from casino revenues partly derived from illegal sources.
You have these towns that are beating their chest about economic development and jobs. They cite a card club, they make money off the card club, the money goes to the city government, they hire police, the police are in charge of overseeing the card club, and there's no oversight beyond that at the state or federal level that's meaningful. So you have these little pockets of corruption that I think are best described as conflict of interest systems locally being established around the state.
How did Kramer not only build a multi-million-dollar drug smuggling empire, but the money laundering machine that went along with it? He needed a network of international finance that could handle the flow of money without raising red flags. Enter Sam Gilbert, a construction magnate whose aggressive business tactics and financial acumen made him the perfect partner. Gilbert, with his connections in construction and finance, facilitated the building of the Bicycle Club, ensuring that every aspect of the operation, from the land acquisition to the construction, was meticulously planned.
Where do people of taste and style stay in Miami? The Hotel Mutiny at Sailboat Bay, a masterpiece of understatement. Our view reminds you of Cannes. Our rooms are so uniquely personal, each is named. Continental breakfast every a.m. A full day of luxury al fresco. Superb cuisine in the sophisticated Mutiny Club. Private, of course, but yours as the privileged guest of the Hotel Mutiny. A masterpiece of understatement.
Mel Kessler was the legal mind behind the operation, a figure as much at home in the courtroom as he was in the shadows of legal loopholes. With a razor-sharp understanding of the law's intricacies, Kessler was less the face of the operation and more its legal puppeteer, pulling strings to ensure the casino's operations remained just within the bounds of legality, or at least beyond the immediate grasp of the law. His role was critical in the orchestration of financial movements. The operation was meticulous. Money laundering cycle maps traced the flow of cash that led federal authorities to seize the Bicycle Club, which they said was built with drug money. Between 1982 and 1986, the drug smuggling Kramer organization imports 500,000 pounds of marijuana from Colombia to Miami, New York, New Orleans, and San Francisco. From southern Florida, a large share of the drug sales profits, about $12 million, is flown to Los Angeles and turned over to Sam Gilbert. In Los Angeles, the Gilbert enterprise converts the cash into checks with the help of local businessmen, including a dentist, a coin dealer, and a banker. From Los Angeles, the checks are shipped to Miami to verify the amount is the same as money sent. From Miami, the checks are sent to Liechtenstein and put into an account listed as BTR Trust. From Liechtenstein, money is wired to Tortola in the Virgin Islands and put into an account known as the Troon Mortgage Account. From Tortola, the money is wired to Los Angeles to finance a $12 million construction loan to build the Bicycle Club. The operation was not without its risks. The constant movement of large sums of cash required not just physical transportation, but also a level of secrecy and trust that was hard to maintain. The plans to finance the Bicycle Club were drawn up on November 17, 1983, at the L'Hermitage Hotel in Beverly Hills, in a room occupied by Jack and Ben Kramer. Prosecutors alleged the meeting was attended by Sam Gilbert. After the Kramers checked out of the L'Hermitage the following day, U.S. Customs agents searched their adjoining 7th floor rooms. In a waste paper basket, they found 3 crumpled legal-size papers with circles, arrows, and names of partners in foreign countries. From that point on, investigators were chipping away at Kramer's operation, eventually turning several accomplices into witnesses against him.
Ben Kramer, arrested last Thursday, appeared at ease in front of a federal magistrate today, until Judge Peter Palermo refused to set bond. The government says champion racer Kramer brought more than 1/2 million pounds of marijuana into the U.S. and wants him to stay in jail until trial time. It says Kramer might leave town if let out on bond, and that's not all. Government agents testified today that Kramer ordered a successful hit on the man who killed one of Kramer's clients. In short, they say, he's dangerous.
Just as a compilation of guesses, speculation, words from the mouth of an indicted co-conspirator who chooses to still remain a fugitive and who may be bragging about anything.
The judge ruled that Kramer has strong ties to the area and probably wouldn't leave, but Palermo does feel Kramer is a definite threat.
While Kramer was in court, nothing much was happening at seized Apache operations in Hollywood and here in Miami. But the government says both businesses could reopen Wednesday under federal management. Amy Huggins, News 4.
Well, he's going to plead not guilty.
Can you elaborate a little bit, please?
I think that probably says it all.
What was his reaction to you today when he realized that he would be staying in jail?
He realized it the first time we realized it, and he was disappointed, but he understands that the system will run its course, and there are methods of appealing decisions from lower judges that we intend to try to take at this point.
Beck, can you give us any comment on the discrepancies that were referred to in the income and income tax forms that were filed?
No, we're not going to comment on that this time. There are obvious discrepancies, and I think there are discrepancies of appearance in who actually is looking at it rather than one of form.
Kramer was arrested on September 15, 1987, and convicted as a drug super kingpin, a designation that underscores his role at the top of this criminal enterprise in 1988. This conviction led to a life sentence. On April 17, 1989, Ben Kramer attempted to escape from the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center in Miami using a helicopter piloted by Charles Clayton Stevens. As Kramer grabbed the helicopter's skid in the prison yard, it hit a fence, causing the rotor to break apart. The helicopter crashed, injuring both Kramer and Stevens, who were then hospitalized. This failed escape attempt led to additional charges for Kramer.
The little two-man helicopter never had a chance, according to federal prison authorities. They say the moment pilot Charles Stevens and inmate Ben Kramer planned the escape, it was doomed. The Federal Correction Center's maximum security yard is designed to prevent helicopter escape attempts.
The recreation yard where he attempted this escape was specifically constructed very narrowly to try to thwart any kind of escape attempt like this.
Ben Kramer was serving a life plus 40-year sentence for drug trafficking. He was a well-known ocean yacht racer, and he's now in serious condition at Jackson Memorial Hospital. The pilot, identified as Charles Stevens, brought his small helicopter to Tamiami Airport from Gold Beach, Oregon. Stevens flew a small two-man helicopter exactly like this one. It's called a Bell 47, and they're at least 30 years old. But other helicopter pilots around the airport here say, in fact, Stevens couldn't fly at all. He'd been here for about 3 weeks, had taken a couple of lessons, and was considered dangerous behind the stick. Pilots who watched Stevens try and fly described it this way.
He didn't seem nervous, skittish, strange, or anything.
No, except he just couldn't fly a helicopter.
Prison officials admit that even this amateur pilot and desperate inmate nearly pulled off the escape in broad daylight. Had the small chopper cleared the fence, guards would not have opened fire.
In most cases, we don't fire for fear of a hostage, for fear that the pilot would be hostage and would be injured.
But prison authorities are also confident that the two men would have quickly been picked up by pursuit planes within minutes. Both of the men, tonight, are in Jackson Memorial Hospital with broken bones. It's not how they planned it, but both of them left the prison by helicopter, life flight helicopter, and they now face federal charges of attempted escape. David Jackson, News 4, Miami.
Aronow, a renowned powerboat designer and racer, was shot on February 3, 1987, only months before Kramer's arrest in Miami, Florida. His death came amidst a backdrop of business disputes, particularly with Kramer, who had once bought and then had to sell back one of Aronow's companies due to issues with the U.S. Customs Service over Kramer's criminal background. This transaction made Kramer a prime suspect in Aronow's murder. Several jailhouse informants claimed that Robert Bobby Young confessed to the hit, saying he was paid $60,000 by Kramer. In 1993, Kramer was formally charged with first-degree murder alongside Young. In 1995, Young pleaded no contest to the murder. And in 1996, Kramer also pleaded no contest to manslaughter, avoiding a trial that could have led to additional life sentences. His manslaughter plea was to run concurrently with his existing life sentence for drug trafficking.
Don was the king of offshore performance boats.
Richard Conti was selling this boat, one designed by Aronow, when he heard the gunfire.
I heard a .45 caliber gun go off. I shoot myself, and I knew it was a .45, and I heard 5 rounds emptied out of the gun.
Speed, power, boats, money, Miami. Sounds like the storyline for a movie or a television series. You mix in big-time politicians and drug dealers, it can't miss. And for a leading man, you have a handsome, strapping, macho guy who's part daredevil, part engineering genius, and a big part self-promoter. Only in the movies? Only on television? No. Expose's Noah Nelson found the story and the lead character, but he'd been murdered.
I remember winning the Miami-Nassau race.
He was 6'2", looked like a pro linebacker, and his smile alone could close a deal. Don Aronow was a hard-driving, tough-talking superstar of the powerboating set. A slick showman with the nerve of a stuntman, Aronow set speed records all over the world with boats he designed and built. The rougher the game, the more he seemed to like it. John Krause was a friend and business associate. Did Aronow have lots of enemies?
More than you'd think. He liked to cut your throat in a business deal sometimes just for the fun of it. It was competition.
He thought it was fun to cut your throat?
Yeah, it was just like racing. It was competition. He'd laugh sometimes.
The Aronow touch was golden. Everything he did seemed charmed. But on February 3rd, 1987, his luck ran out.
When Metro-Dade homicide detectives arrived, they found Aronow's bullet-riddled white Mercedes. Bystanders say he was in his car.
In Miami, it led the news. Aronow had been murdered. A celebrity gunned down in front of dozens of witnesses in a gangland-style killing.
His friendships with everyone from police chiefs to presidents was widely known. He was the father of that industry. Aronow was to boats what Ford was to automobiles as far as offshore racing goes.
The fast boats of offshore racing became toys in Miami's new lifestyle. But the boats were also tools in Miami's underworld. Homicide detective Greg Smith. Why was there such a strong connection between the world of the high-speed powerboats and crime?
In the early to mid-'80s, the powerboat was the method of choice with the smugglers.
Apparently, Don Aronow was widely known on both sides of the law. Society's upper crust and its underbelly were lured by his boats and his style. He even built a boat for one of his new friends, then Vice President George Bush. Bush still pilots his cigarette Fidelity around Kennebunkport.
Well, as savvy as Bush was about a lot of things, he was simply naive about Don. In short, I think he was in awe of Don Aronow, the legend.
In 1985, Aronow's big league connections paid off. His USA Racing Company landed a $1.7 million deal to build chase boats for the U.S. Customs Service. The high-speed catamarans were designed to intercept drug smugglers off the Florida coast. Aronow landed the no-bid contract as if he were the only game in town. The boats were called Blue Thunder. The deal called for Aronow to build Blue Thunders for $150,000 apiece. There were other good boats around, but they wouldn't have that Aronow mystique.
I don't think Customs had an inkling of Don's other side. For the same reason that Bush was enamored by Don Aronow, I think Customs was, about Don Aronow, the legend.
But not long after the first boat hit the water, Aronow, the legend, quietly sold the company and the government contract to this man, Ben Kramer, one of Miami's biggest drug smugglers. Detective Greg Smith.
Ben Kramer, as we know, owned a powerboat company, Apache, and he also played very hard. It's common knowledge that Mr. Kramer was involved in the smuggling business.
Customs now had a deal with the devil, trying to catch drug smugglers with boats supplied by a man who smuggled drugs. It is now known that Ben Kramer and his father used freshly laundered drug dollars to buy Aronow's company and the customs boat contract. By the time drug agents on the trail put it all together, the Kramers and the government were already partners. The flashy world of the powerboats had lost some of its shine.
When we looked at the money and traced the money back, we began to draw the common denominator of the offshore boat business and, by inference, marijuana smuggling.
The deal in which Aronow sold the government's contract turned out to be a part of one of the biggest money laundering schemes ever uncovered. The investigation ended with convictions for Ben Kramer, his father Jack, and their attorney, Melvin Kessler. Investigators tell Expose that powerboat king Don Aronow knowingly received hundreds of thousands of dollars in laundered drug money for the sale of his company, and that Aronow raked in lots of cash for boats he'd never built.
The IRS was looking at Aronow very closely at the time of his death, as was DEA. And indeed, it now is known that there were strong reasons to believe that the boat business was a beautiful money laundering scam.
In January 1987, the IRS seized records of Aronow's sale of his company to the Kramers. Just one day before he would have been subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury, Aronow was murdered.
For a white male in his late 30s, dark complexion.
After a 4-year investigation, police arrested 41-year-old hitman Bobby Young for Aronow's murder. Young had already been indicted in Florida for another murder and was serving time in Oklahoma on a cocaine charge. His lawyer in the cocaine case? Melvin Kessler, the same attorney involved with the Kramers when they bought Aronow's company.
U.S. Customs, sir. How many people are on the vessel?
The Blue Thunders are still a weapon in Customs' war on drugs. They have outlasted Don Aronow, the man whose life and reputation came crashing down while trying to play on both sides of the law.
He certainly had known felons as his associates, and those felons were without question deeply involved in not any drug trafficking, world-class drug trafficking. Now, did Mr. Aronow, was he so naive that he wouldn't have known this? I find that hard to believe.
In 2009, Young confessed to authorities that while he was the one who pulled the trigger, Colombian drug dealers had actually ordered the hit on Aronow. This claim was part of his last statements before he passed away. In 2010, Kramer attempted to have his conviction overturned, arguing that the prosecution withheld evidence about Young's confession implicating the Colombians. However, his appeal was unsuccessful. Since the stringent drug war policies of the 1980s, which saw draconian sentencing for marijuana smuggling under laws like the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, there's been a noticeable shift towards more lenient sentencing for marijuana-related offenses. Randy Lanier, once a celebrated race car driver, was convicted alongside Ben Kramer, resulting in a life sentence without parole in 1988. However, Lanier was unexpectedly granted early release in 2014 after serving 27 years. His parole came about through a combination of factors: the Obama administration's initiative to reevaluate the sentences of nonviolent drug offenders, and a sealed legal maneuver that might have involved Lanier providing information or cooperation to investigators, though the details remain under wraps. This release was part of a broader movement towards reevaluating harsh sentences from the drug war era, emphasizing rehabilitation over lifelong punishment for nonviolent crimes. Ben Kramer remains in prison until this date.
Hello everyone. Just received my fresh copy of Vehicle magazine, the only magazine that is ad-free and covers the offshore powerboating world. Wow. It's a quality product. I know I'm featured here, so I'm going to turn to that page. Oh, there I am. Juan Almeida, King of 188. Awesome, awesome product.